Mark had always dreamed of owning a house in the countryside. When he stumbled upon the listing for a small, weathered property at a price far below market value, he couldn't believe his luck. The old Victorian stood at the edge of a dense forest, its creaky exterior seemingly untouched by modern renovations. It had been on the market for years, but no one had dared to buy it, until now. The day Mark moved in, he felt an unsettling stillness inside the house, but he chalked it up to the isolation. After a long day of unpacking, he decided to explore the basement, a damp, cold room that seemed to stretch further beneath the house than the floor plan suggested. His flashlight flickered across dusty shelves, old tools, and a scattering of forgotten belongings. That's when he saw it, a wooden crate in the corner, almost hidden beneath a torn sheet. Inside the crate was a collection of old VHS tapes, each one numbered, and all labeled with the same faded handwriting, The Witness. Intrigued, Mark carried them upstairs, his curiosity overtaking the sense of dread gnawing at the back of his mind. His first mistake was putting in the first tape. The grainy footage flickered to life, showing a man sitting in the very living room Mark now occupied. The man looked gaunt, exhausted, with eyes that darted nervously toward every shadow in the room. "If you're watching this," the man on the tape began, "then you're living in the house now. I'm sorry. I truly am." Mark's pulse quickened as the man on the screen described witnessing strange, impossible events. It started with faint whispers late at night, too quiet to make out. Then, objects would move on their own, furniture shifting an inch here, doors creaking open there. But it wasn't long before the occurrences escalated. Shadowy figures with hollow eyes standing at the edge of the woods, staring at the house in silence. The man claimed that these figures would inch closer every night. "They won't stop until you're one of them," the man on the tape whispered, his voice breaking. "They want you to be the next witness." Mark stopped the tape, an icy chill running down his spine. It was just a recording, he told himself. A story meant to scare people, like some kind of found footage horror film. But as he sat there in silence, he could swear he heard something. A faint whispering. It seemed to come from just beyond the walls. His second mistake was playing the next tape. Each tape chronicled the man's increasingly desperate attempts to understand what was happening in the house. The more the man recorded, the more bizarre and terrifying his experiences became. He heard footsteps circling his bed at night, though no one was there. The door to the basement would swing open on its own, as if inviting him to come down. But worst of all were the moments when the man caught glimpses of himself in the mirrors around the house, only to see a stranger's reflection staring back. By the third tape, the man no longer sat in the living room. The footage showed shaky handheld shots of him moving through the house, his breathing shallow as though he were being hunted. "They're here," he whispered, camera trembling. "They live in the walls. They want to show me what they saw." Mark had no idea what the man meant until things started happening to him. That night, as Mark lay in bed, he heard a soft creak. His heart pounded as he strained to listen. There it was again, a faint sound, like footsteps moving toward his room. He jumped out of bed and opened the door, but the hallway was empty. The whispers had grown louder now, just beneath the floorboards, seeping through the cracks in the walls. As the days passed, the phenomena from the tapes began to manifest around him. First, it was the subtle things. The doors opening on their own, shadows moving in the corners of his vision. But soon, Mark started hearing those same footsteps circling his bed, felt the presence of something watching him as he tried to sleep. Then one night, he looked out the window and saw them. Figures, barely distinguishable from the trees, standing at the edge of the forest. Their hollow eyes locked onto his house. Terrified, Mark rushed to the basement to watch the remaining tapes, desperate for answers. The final recordings were more frantic, disjointed. The man's voice was hoarse, broken by fear. "The house is cursed," he rasped. "Everyone who moves in becomes a part of it. We see what they saw, the ones who lived here before us. And soon someone else will see us. In the last tape, the camera was placed in the corner of the basement. The man stood in front of it, shaking uncontrollably. There's no escape. I can hear them, in the walls. They're coming for me. The footage cut to static, but the audio kept playing, a low, steady knock like someone pounding on the other side of a wall. That night, Mark heard it too. A steady knock coming from beneath the floor. He knew, just as the man had said, that there was no escape. The curse wasn't just in the house. It was in the very foundation. The house itself was a witness to something unspeakable, something supernatural. And now, Mark was the witness too. The figures from the woods were getting closer every night. The knocking beneath the floor was growing louder. Mark's final mistake was trying to destroy the tapes. As he gathered them up, intending to burn them in the fireplace, the lights flickered out. The air grew thick and cold, and from the shadows of the basement he heard footsteps, dozens of them, creeping toward him. Panicked, he dropped the tapes and ran upstairs, locking himself in the bedroom. But the whispers were everywhere now, growing louder and louder. They weren't just outside. They were inside the walls, inside his head. And the knocking was right behind him. Slowly, he turned toward the mirror hanging on the bedroom wall. His reflection was gone. In its place stood a man, gaunt and hollow-eyed, staring back at him with a look of pure terror. Mark realized too late that he had become part of the story. The house had a new witness, and the tapes were still waiting for the next one.